Lebombo Border Post between South Africa and Mozambique is expected to be extremely busy today as travelers will be on the final push to get to various destinations in time for Christmas. The Border Management Authority says it's ready to facilitate the clearance of both freight as well as passengers. Amid the violent protests that are reported to have flared up in neighboring Mozambique after the Constitutional Council confirmed that FRELIMO is the winner of the October 9 elections. Newzroom Afrika's Mweli Masilela is following that story for us. Mweli, a very good morning to you. So following that Constitutional Council's declaration that Daniel Chapo is the winner of the elections, we also heard some reports of sporadic violence playing out in Mozambique. What can you tell us about what's happening on the South African side of the border?
Aldrin, I've never seen the Lebombo Border Post being this quiet on the eve of Christmas, and you can see that today it's a bit quiet. But of course, when we spoke to the Border Management Authority, they are saying that the numbers are showing that many people moved from South Africa to Mozambique quite early, especially on Saturday and Sunday. Those were the peak days for the Border Management Authority in terms of clearing travelers here at the Lebombo Border Post, recording about 23,000 people per day. So if you look into Saturday and Sunday, it means there was more than 40,000 people that were cleared here at the Lebombo Border Post. Of course, the issue of protests in Mozambique was a huge concern for the Border Management Authority. In fact, they were on standby to activate their contingency plan to actually use the Mananga Border Post between Eswatini and South Africa to divert people from this border post to that side. But it seems that everything at the present moment hasn't changed. People are being cleared smoothly. But let's bring in the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Dr. Mike Masia. But I was saying that I've never seen the border being this quiet on the 24th of December. What would you attribute the current situation to?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Mweli. Yeah, so indeed, we also, as part of our planning, we had thought that the 24th is going to be the peak in terms of the people exiting South Africa for Mozambique. But what we actually saw is the fact that on Saturday, as well as on Sunday, we actually managed to process around 25,000 people exiting South Africa, to the extent that the peak then became on a Sunday, which was around 26,000 ultimately. So if you were to really look at that, we actually, I would say, put that around the issue of the threat in terms of the announcement, which was to happen yesterday. So on that basis, everybody wanted to make sure that they leave South Africa and they ultimately enter Mozambique early before the actual announcement, which was made yesterday. So our peak was on a Sunday where we did around 26,000 people that left South Africa for Mozambique.
Yesterday, we were told of those protests flaring up in Mozambique, and previously we've seen when that happened, the border, there was an interruption. You had to temporarily suspend those operations. How come this time around there was no suspension of operations?
Yeah, remember, the suspension of operations is always triggered by what happens in Rasen Garcia side, whereby the processing get disrupted that side, and once it get disrupted that side, we also get forced to also do the stopping of the processing. But this time around, they did confirm to us that there is no any threat to the port itself on their side, and therefore on that basis they continue to receive people that we're processing, and on that basis we continue to process. For instance, in the past 24 hours we've been able to process just around 10,000 people. 8,000 of those were exiting South Africa into Mozambique, and around 2,000 were returning back to South Africa. So that particular process actually continued overnight until now, and we didn't get any indication that there is a threat to the actual port operations, as it were. However, we are aware that the corridor on their side is badly affected. We have also seen some videos where the toll gate, for example, just on the corridor towards Matola was also vandalized and things were burned and all of those kind of issues. But remember, so long as there is no threat at the Rasen Garcia port on their side and they continue to process, we will definitely continue to process. The only difference is the issue of cargo. As you can see, the issue of cargo, most of the cargo also has started leaving the corridor, because indeed the threat to cargo is more serious, because that is where the biggest challenge is. But in terms of people movement, there are no issues. Just overnight, we did just around 100 trucks that moved in, and most of those were just general cargo trucks, not necessarily mineral trucks, as it were.
Any information on people who maybe decided to turn back to South Africa or back into Mozambique because of the threat or about what is happening in Mozambique?
Yeah, you see, when you look at this particular protest and you juxtapose it against the threat to cargo, there is not much of a threat to people. I mean, the way in which these protesters are actually kind of managing the activity, in terms of this corridor, it is very much clear that the biggest threat or the target a bit is in terms of cargo, particularly mineral cargo, as it were. But in terms of normal people, meaning Mozambicans going back to Mozambique, there hasn't been any threat. They're still able to maneuver through the environment. This has also been observed even in the previous protest. When it happened around the 14th, the 15th, and all of that, there's not necessarily been a threat for people. That is why we said, should there be a threat for people, then we'll be able to go to Mananga. But in this instance, there's no threat, and that is why they continue to protest. Remember, the biggest problem that happened last time is that the immigration, the customs officers here in Rasen Garcia, they shot one of the protesters. That is what triggered them to start vandalizing their operating places. They started burning their vehicles and things like that. But since that actually passed, there hasn't been any threat to the port itself, and that is why we continue to do the processing for people movement.
Commissioner, thank you very much for your time. That is the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Dr. Mike Masilela, giving us an update in terms of what is happening on the ground. Of course, saying that they will keep an eye in terms of what is happening, and also they'll be informed by the information that they get from their Mozambican counterparts, whether to suspend operations or not at the present moment. When you look at things now, the situation is calm. Aldrin.
Thank you so much for that update there, Mweli Masilela, joining us from Komatipoort, that is where the Lebombo Border Post is found. A bit later on, we'll be in conversation with Louis Nchato, who is a Center for Investigative Journalism reporter, to speak to us about what the current situation is like in Mozambique. So he'll give us an update with regards to that. He'll be joining us from Mozambique.